No weight loss that comes through restriction or pain is permanent.
Interesting reaction. But what does it mean?
You smell what I smell? That's some pure bullshit.
What's up, motivators? Welcome back. It's Kevin. This is Pure Bullfit, back from the dead. We survived the flu, people. Thank you guys so much for being patient while I just tried to focus on resting and recovering, putting all the social media stuff aside as we got over the flu. It was a rough one. I haven't actually been that sick in a really long time. And I'm going to talk more about, the effect that it had on my body, how it affected my performance and things like that in tomorrow's video, the anniversary of the first real video we put out. Last year, the 1-year anniversary of Pure Bullfit. We'll be talking about that as I take on Vitruvian Physique's heptathlon physical challenge, or at the very least, my version of it. So we'll talk about that tomorrow in tomorrow's video, but it does kind of tie into what I want to talk to you about today. As you saw in the thumbnail, in the title, we're going to be talking about restrictive diets and why they don't work. Now, the other reason that this has come to mind, not just my experience with losing a bunch of weight while I was sick and thinking about the effect that had on the body, The Biggest Loser is back on TV, and I'm not gonna sit here and talk a bunch about The Biggest Loser and everything that is wrong with it. Not only would that be a very long video, but it has already been thoroughly covered by Alan Roberts and other channels like John from Obese to Beast. And if you're interested in finding out just how wrong The Biggest Loser gets it again, I encourage you to check out those channels. I've got some of the videos linked below in the description box if you're interested. But there is one key factor, one key statement from one of the recent videos from Alan Roberts that I did want to play for you right now.
The scale is not the fucking goal. Health should be the goal for these people. That's the whole problem with this fucking show.
That pretty much sums it up right there. It has to be about your health. It can't be about the scale. It has to be about your life. It's not about your looks. We all have these different goals, but this is not a revolutionary idea. We're not all just coming around to it. This is what we have been saying, particularly myself, since the very beginning. Go back and look at my first videos on this. Yes, your feelings matter, but not as much as facts. Yes, obesity does not make you a bad person in any way. It shouldn't be a reason for people to harm you, to ridicule you, to use your state of being as a pejorative, but it does invite acquired conditions like diabetes, sleep apnea, particularly obstructive sleep apnea. It can shorten your life or complicate your life in a number of ways. Now, one thing that we do agree on, the health at every size, the fat acceptance communities, and the fitness community, is that restrictive diets don't work. What? So not only are restrictive diets not effective in the long run, they can stand to do you harm by triggering certain biological and behavioral reactions. And we'll talk about those here in a minute. The first thing that I want to do is to discuss what exactly it is we're talking about by restrictive diet. That's where we take in considerably less calories than we currently are, or that we need to maintain our body mass, with the hope of reducing that body mass. Now, we normally think of it as like, I'm going to reduce body fat by doing this, but that doesn't even work out. We'll talk about that in a minute. The first point I want to make is talking about this idea that 95% of these diets fail. When we're talking about 95% of diets fail, this is what we're talking about. It comes from a 1959 study where they took 100 people and they put them on an aggressively restrictive diet in which everybody lost weight. They taught them nothing about nutrition, how to have a healthy relationship with food, or how to incorporate activity, and then release them back out into the world. They adopted their old behaviors, and of course, 95% of them put the weight back on. Actually, 5% managed to keep it off. I'm actually really proud of those folks. But this is not exactly a universally applicable study, because it was really poorly conducted and by most scientific standards today is considered inaccurate and inadequate as far as studies go. So we shouldn't be using this 95 statistic the way that we are, the way that a lot of people in the communities like Health at Every Size are, to state that diets just don't work. Restrictive diets don't work. You're almost most assuredly going to put all that weight back on, perhaps even more. And that's for the reasons we're about to discuss. So let's talk a little bit about metabolic damage. There are folks out there, extremists in the anti-diet culture, that would have you believe that the second you go on a diet, you are irreparably damaging your metabolism. Now, there is some truth to the notion that your metabolism slows down even in excess, that is explained by the reduction in body mass, as it requires a certain amount of energy to maintain the mass that we have. If you weigh 250 pounds like I do, it takes a certain amount of energy to maintain that weight. Now, when we have a significant reduction in those calories and we lose weight, it stands to reason that our lower weight requires less calories in order to sustain it. But there is a temporary condition where our metabolism drops lower than would be accounted for by our new body mass. And that's just a natural reaction that our body has to produce less energy for the short term while we're getting significantly less energy in an attempt to conserve energy. Our bodies were built to survive, not to perform. We can teach them to perform, but we have to train them to perform. They want to survive, and one of the ways that it does that is to conserve energy the same way it conserves heat when you're cold by pulling the circulation towards the center of your body. We end up with frostbite because we're not getting enough warm blood to our extremities. It's the same kind of thing. It's really inconvenient not to have fingers, but your body is deciding your lungs, your heart, your intestines are much more important in that equation. Same thing with our metabolism. It's going to slow down and reduce our total activity because we haven't got as much activity. And that can be one of the leading reasons why people think that they're stalling when they're in a deficit and their Fitbit tells them that they very well should have lost 3 or 4 pounds this week for all the steps they took and all the calories they burned. First and foremost, you have to be careful with those calorie trackers. In 2015, a fairly recent study conducted by Stanford University demonstrated that even the name brand calorie trackers for calories burned are grossly inaccurate. Of the ones that they tested, Fitbit, Apple, and a number of others, the most accurate overestimated the amount of calories burned by 27%, and the least accurate overestimated by 93%. If you're eating all those calories back, no wonder you're not losing weight. In addition to that, this reduction in the energy that our body puts out usually affects our non-exercise activity, as Dr. Eric Helms, a researcher in this field, talks about when you have a significant reduction in calories. Generally, it can be explained, even if we're hitting our workouts, even if we think we're doing everything that we need to, that exercise activity does not account for as much of the energy that we burn in a day as the non-exercise activity, the getting up and walking around, the doing the daily tasks, the doing more than simply existing, the getting up out of bed, the thermogenic effect of food. Pardon me, I'm still struggling to speak after 10 days or 2 weeks of being offline. The thermogenic effect of food, where we spend energy to process food, accounts for more than our exercise. So just because you hit your 30-minute HIIT routine, or you went and you did your resistance training, don't think that plus your caloric deficit is automatically going to mean you're not going to stall, or you're not going to maybe even put on a little weight. This can be explained by the reduction in energy produced for those non-exercise activities that we're just not getting to because we're too damn tired. It's a difficult balance to find, but it's temporary. This metabolic damage that folks are talking about is a temporary condition until you are no longer in a state of under-consuming for the level of activity and your body mass. Almost everybody recovers from it. And of course, there are a few anomalies or a few outliers where folks suffer some sort of permanent damage, but it's extremely rare. You wouldn't not wear your seatbelt because that one guy that you heard about through 3 relatives and your best friend managed to choke himself in a car accident. You wouldn't stop using your seatbelt just because that may or may not have actually happened. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of people are safer for using them. The vast majority of people recover from this temporary slowdown in their metabolism when they engage in a restrictive, specifically when they engage in restrictive diets that aggressively undercut the amount of intake that they normally get. The second really big problem with restrictive diets is they don't teach you a damn thing. You take this cookie diet that John from Obese to Beast was talking about, it doesn't teach you a damn thing. You replace your meals, you get a net caloric deficit because everybody is recommended to do 1,100 or 1,200 calories regardless of your size. They even say in the advertising that everybody's guaranteed to lose weight at this amount of calories. Yeah, you're starving yourself. You're starving most people. You'd have to be like 5'1" and 130 pounds for that to be an adequate amount of calories for you to intake safely. So naturally, it's going to work in the short term, but it's going to trigger all of these physiological and behavioral reactions that we're talking about. Diet should be nothing more than your relationship with food. But these aggressively restrictive diets aren't a relationship with food. It's long suffering and slow torture. It is something that you endure for a set amount of time because you have a goal that you really want to hit. And it doesn't teach you anything, so you can't sustain it. The third issue we're going to talk about is you're not just losing fat as we're losing weight. You're losing your lean mass, your muscle tissue, the stuff that you want to keep. Some of us, precious few of us, are in such a state of decondition or holding on to so much weight or so underweight that it doesn't matter what kind of weight we put on or take off, it's all good. But we will eventually get to the point where you should be primarily focusing on getting rid of excess adipose tissue or that fat tissue. But when we have an aggressive deficit, we are more likely to have a higher rate of catabolism, which is where we break down our lean mass, our proteins, through processes like gluconeogenesis in order to fuel our body in the short term. Now, it's a natural process, but too much of it isn't exactly healthy. It's the same thing that happens to us when we don't get enough sleep. You lose weight, sure, but more of it comes from your lean mass than when you have a healthy relationship with food or when you're getting well rested. So if your goal is to lose body fat, to get healthier, to avoid the complications of having excess adipose tissue, the pressure on your joints, the sleep apnea, the increased risk of 13 different cancers, all of the problems that come with it, you need to focus on losing the right kind of weight. And this is exactly what Alan means by, it's not about the scale, it's about your health. And the fourth thing that we have to talk about is the psychological effects. There are a number of studies done on the psychology of deprivation and the psychology of scarcity. Scarcity is not having something around for whatever reason, by design or by circumstance. The thing that you need or want is no longer as available. And deprivation is taking something you had away. Now, the psychology of both of these conditions is actually pretty similar when it comes to both the economy and the intake of food. Both of these conditions, scarcity, not having it around, or deprivation, the act of taking it away, make that object more valuable to us. We want it more, we focus on it more. We think about it more, we crave it more. We convince ourselves that we need it, and this is obviously problematic. This can lead us to hyper-focus on the things that we want or feel like we're just holding out to the weekend and then we binge, we overindulge. It can cause us to give up on it altogether because we just don't have the willpower. These aggressively restrictive diets can make a number of unhealthy choices very appealing. If you're considerably under-eating, calorically dense foods are what's going to appeal to you. Not necessarily nutrient-dense food that happens to be very filling, but low in calories. When you're really hungry and you've been hungry for a while, you want a damn cheeseburger. You don't really want broccoli. Broccoli's high in fiber. It's going to fill you up, but it's not going to satisfy you. Your body wants calories, it's going to get calories. So it's going to prioritize the ways to get that cheap, fast, and dense in a hurry. And the second major psychological effect of deprivation or scarcity is to impede our decision making in regard to that limited resource. We are not as good at making decisions on how to acquire, how to maintain, or even how to use a resource that is scarce or deprived from us. We are more likely to make bad, rash, impulsive decisions or decisions that only affect our immediate circumstances and not our long-term goals. This is borne out in economic models, it's borne out in how we eat. These reinforced behaviors, bad behaviors, can lead to us abandoning our plan to begin with, failing at it, convincing ourselves it was never going to work, and readopting or returning to the behaviors that got us into the condition we are in the first place. That, plus feeling low energy, not getting as much done around the house, possibly leading to increased symptoms of depression which already are present in many people who suffer from a state of obesity. We can just create this spiral that we can never get out of, and no wonder so many attempts at dieting fail. Restrictive diets is not the way. So what do? We have to learn to have a healthy relationship with food, and that is something that Health at Every Size gets right. I just think that some people want to jump to the end instead of learning all of the requisite processes, how to interact with food, what foods are good for them, what foods are going to complicate their conditions, how much they actually need to eat in accordance with their activity, how to increase their activity joyfully or otherwise, whatever it is that you want to do, how to balance your energy output with your intake. Having a realistic view of what carrying around the extra weight or not having enough weight on your body or just having a bad body composition within a normal range. It is absolutely possible to be carrying too much adipose tissue at a normal weight. Here in the United States, we consume more and do less than ever before. We are no longer a society that embraces activity as a natural part of our daily life. We sit in our chairs more than ever. Our jobs are chair-bound more than ever. We spend more of our recreational time in place, doing very little, and eating for entertainment. And this problem is only going to get worse, so it is incumbent upon us to have a knowledgeable, intentional understanding of nutrition, the way that it works, how to incorporate it into our lives without depriving ourselves, without creating a false situation of scarcity that's only going to reinforce bad behaviors. Restrictive diets don't work, but a healthy relationship with food, understanding the food that you eat, and learning how to increase your daily activity, those do, every time. It takes some elbow grease, it takes a lot of work, it takes some introspection, and it takes being honest with yourself. But it's all worth it, because you are. All right, guys, that's it. That's the video for today. If you have questions on how to get started, I'm going to provide some resources in the links below. I've got my Google Drive where you can get any of the free programs that I provide. I also have links of other coaches and services that I have personally worked with for or used their programs and trust to get the job done. You can trust those folks in my opinion, but I want you to make that assessment for yourselves. Never take what I say as the gospel truth. I do not shit nuggets of universal wisdom. You should approach every bit of information you receive with a critical mind, or you are failing yourself. So until I see you guys again in the next video, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and go fit yourself.